Welcome to American Racing Snobs. Tony Rizzuti, fresh off the United States Grand Prix.
You've got a glow about you.
I do. It's an eerie glow, right? Because the weekend didn't go perfect, but it was Formula One, so it was great. That other voice you hear, that's former ESPN Formula One correspondent Eric Morse. Eric, the U.S. Grand Prix turned out to be everything we kind of thought it was, including that incredible sixth championship for Mr. Lewis Hamilton.
Well, I think we all kind of expected it would be wrapped up here. He only needed eighth or better. Bottas had to win to keep it going. He held up his end of the bargain, trying to push the championship to the penultimate round, which is coming up in a few weeks at Brazil. However, Lewis Hamilton stormed from his fifth starting spot on the grid all the way up to the second spot, his 16th podium in a row for Lewis Hamilton, and it sparked the celebration of his sixth world title. We kind of had a feeling this was coming for some time now, but still gives us an opportunity to reflect on the accomplishments of truly one of the greats in Formula One history.
One of the greats. He moves in second all-time with most world championships with 6. Michael Schumacher, obviously, at the top with 7. He passes Juan Manuel Fangio at 5, and then there's Alain Prost and Sebastian Vettel at 4. And I think before we get into the race, since we're talking about Hamilton and the incredible accomplishment he's at, obviously he's so in rarefied air. Only one driver, Michael Schumacher, who many thought none of his records would ever be reached. Hamilton's right there. Hamilton's saying he's in the prime of his career. He's nowhere even close to where he thinks his potential is. He thinks he's growing every time, and it sparked a lot of debate, especially at COTA. I heard it a lot as to whether Lewis Hamilton should be considered one of the greatest drivers of all time. And we've talked about this before, and I know you've thrown it out as something we want the fans to tell us.
Next week's show, I'm excited. We're gonna debate where exactly does he fall. There's no doubt that he's one of the greats. I think that's pretty obvious right now. One of. But where does he fall in the ranking? Everyone's going to have a different opinion on this. I've put a lot of thought into it since we started batting this idea around, and we really want to hear what you have to say. So please send us a message on Twitter, comment on this post, get at us on Facebook. We'd love to hear what you have to say, especially when it comes to, I've got an argument for and against any one of maybe 10 guys that you could put up there in terms of the greatest Grand Prix driver of all time, and Lewis has definitely entered that discussion.
Yeah, and I heard a lot of against when it came to Lewis Hamilton this weekend, which really surprised me. I mean, if you look at the tail of the tape, and we're just talking about Schumacher and Hamilton right now, Schumacher 91 wins, Hamilton 83. We talked about the championship, 7-6 in favor of Michael Schumacher. Poles, 68 for Schumacher, 87 for Hamilton.
And counting.
306 Grand Prix started to 248, 155 podiums to 150. I mean, really, if you break it down, the stats are very similar across the board. The argument I kept hearing at COTA, and I don't think it's fair, and we talk about, when you talk about different eras, it's hard to really put people in different eras and know what they would have done in different cars and everything else. But the argument I kept hearing was, since they started the turbo hybrid era, Hamilton has been in the unbeatable car, and nobody's even been close. Not Ferrari, not Red Bull, not any of them. It's been Mercedes that he hasn't done it. The car's done it. Eric, I guess my question to you is, can't we say that in every era? I mean, I think it was David Hobbs that said great drivers drive great cars. That's just the way it is.
That's true, but I also call BS on that theory because Ferrari could have and should have beaten him in at least 2 of his last 3 titles. I think that if Ferrari executes and Sebastian Vettel executes, that he was beatable. This was not the invincible Mercedes of 2016 or 2014, where he really was just racing Nico Rosberg in a 2-man fight for the championship. There was opportunity for Ferrari and especially Sebastian Vettel the last 2, maybe 3 seasons. And for Lewis to have remained as steady under pressure consistently, I think that has to elevate him above that argument of, well, it's just that Silver Arrows. It's not just that Silver Arrows. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of who's the greatest and why.
Yeah,
I think
we'll talk about that next week.
I think that the Schumacher-Hamilton debate is a big part of that because they're so similar in terms of the type of car they had, the era that they had. Their numbers are huge, mostly because we started racing a lot more in recent years in terms of, in Fangio's era, there was only 6 to 8 races per season. So you have to take different things into account, and I have painstakingly done that. And I can't wait to tell you all about it next week, but I want to hear all about COTA. I've only been to the track once. It was 6 years ago. I went to the then known as the Australian V8 Supercars, had I think it was a 400-kilometer over 4 races event. I really enjoyed it. Didn't get to see the entire track in use because they didn't use the full Grand Prix circuit. The track was still relatively new. It was smooth back then. Tell me, what was your favorite part about going to the Grand Prix at COTA?
I don't know that I can pick a favorite part. I mean, obviously, the biggest memory I had from it was just on Friday, we just kind of wandered around the racetrack during all the free practices that were going on to see the different general admission vantage points, which was something you pointed out to me. You were like, just get a GA ticket and sit on the hill somewhere, just move around. We got bleacher seats in the S's in turn 4 section, which were really good seats, so no complaints there. But we wanted to see the entire course, and we did that, and then just walked into the fan zone just to see how it compared to a NASCAR race or an IndyCar race. What kind of stuff did they have going on? And to just be walking around by ourselves. I mean, it was pretty quiet on Friday in that section of the racetrack, and I saw 6 people coming at us wearing all red. And my plan for Sunday was to wear all red, but I couldn't find red pants. Every color of red pant I found was wrong. It just was not going to work. And I just kind of glanced up and went, oh, that's pretty cool. There's 6 people doing what I wanted. And then all of a sudden it was like, Bonotto. And I'm like, that's not just 6 random people. Like, that's the people. And just freaked and reaching for phones. I'm like, Renee, get the camera, her camera, my camera. And I'm just like, Mateo, will you take a picture with my son, who luckily...
Who was appropriately dressed based on the pictures you sent me, because I get a picture from Tony on, I think it was Friday, and he is wearing his Max Verstappen getup.
I was as bright an orange a shirt as you could have on in a Red Bull hat. Yep.
Luckily, your son bailed you out as you happen upon the Ferrari team principal. I'm sure you said, I underneath all this, I really bleed red. I'm sure you said something like that, right?
I wanted to. I just shook his hand and said, good luck.
Got starstruck?
Yeah, I just was like, will you take the picture? And he was, his people they didn't tell him no. They weren't like trying to pull him away, but they were kind of like, if you stop, then people are going to see us. And that's what happened. He stopped, took a picture with my son, and said something to him, and then a whole group like kind of saw him stop, and they were trying to get to him, and he actually told them to stop. And he said something to my son. I asked my son what he said, and he's like, I don't know. I couldn't understand him. But he was really, I mean, if you look at the picture, and I've posted it to our social media at Racing Snobs so you can see the photo, he smiled. He put his hand on my son's shoulder. He talked to him a little bit. He was great. He told the adults to get away. I didn't push it for a picture myself because I saw that because it was a kid, he took the time, which was pretty neat. And I just shook his hand as he walked away. Said, thank you and good luck this weekend. It was pretty neat. They went over to a Mission Win Now appearance. And if you've never been to Formula One, this was my first time. When drivers do autograph sessions or appearances, or a team principal does an appearance, they're short. These aren't like your 30-minute deals that you see in NASCAR and everybody gets to ask a question. It's 5 to 10 minutes max. They're in, they're out, and that's kind of what happened, and we kind of watched the scrum. But, I mean, that was a highlight because that doesn't happen. Like, you were like, how'd you pull that off? And I didn't have any special credential. I wasn't in an area that – I was in the main fan zone, like right at the main entrance, and we just happened upon it. Just
right place, right time.
And that's just so cool. And I kept telling Ryan, like, that does not happen.
You don't meet Formula One personalities out in the wild.
No.
It's
not the big ones.
No. I once sat next to Eddie Jordan on a bus, and I think it was Will Buxton, because Eddie was lost, and he was asking me how to get to somewhere in Montreal. And when I told Will Buxton about that later. He goes, "You could have gotten rid of him for all of us. You could have just sent him to Laval. We'll never see him again." But it's so rare to see, these guys they're very guarded.
Yeah.
It's not like NASCAR or IndyCar or NHRA or what we're used to in the States, where these guys are being accessible as part of their job description.
I don't know why I was more surprised to see Binotto than I would had it been Vettel or Leclerc.
Yeah.
I just was. I just didn't expect
He's got
him
a lot to think about
to be doing appearances. So that was definitely the highlight. Some other things, because I had a lot of people ask me about it. I mentioned on the last podcast about my concern over Lot Z.
Yes, what happened?
Lot Z turned out to be
Z.
exactly what you said it was. It was somebody's yard, and in this case, we called him Farmer Brown. We don't know who he was, but a guy had a big farmer field.
Farmer Zach Brown? That's what the Z stands for?
Exactly. It literally, there was a fence separating the main L lot that was Coda's and this guy's yard, basically his farm. And we parked on it, and there was a little walkway that he cut in his fence. And they would park a car so nobody could go over the light part of the fence and sneak into the good lot. But I didn't walk any further than anybody else. And the beauty of it, and I don't want to give this away because if I ever go back, people are going to know. But I'm probably going to go to a different Grand Prix. I'm probably going to join you in Montreal for my next one. The beauty of it, after the end of the Grand Prix, and for those that didn't hear about this, it was their biggest crowd ever. Complete sellout Saturday, Sunday, their largest crowd ever. So I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of here? That Lot L that was a Coda lot had police staged at it and forced everybody in that lot to go right. For where I was going, I needed to go left. Well, they weren't at Farmer Brown's Lot Z entrance. I never lifted one time in 3 days pulling in or pulling out of my lot.
You were
170,000
beyond
people.
The jurisdiction of the Texas State Troopers.
I never lifted. Now, we got 2 miles away from the racetrack, and they start routing all the traffic that they took weird ways back to the main road. We sat, but we were away from the event, and I thought that was pretty good. Usually it's getting out of the event that's hard. Then once you catch it, you sit in it again. We didn't. It was great. So Lot Z exists. It was worth it from a financial standpoint. I think I broke even or may have saved $5. The first day it was $20. And I paid $135, I think, after fees. And I'm like, oh, I got hosed.
That's $5 you can put towards some red pants.
Yeah, no doubt. The second day it was $60 to park. I go, all right, we're getting closer. Now we're at $80. If it's at least $60 tomorrow, I did good, and it was $80 on race day. So I think I actually stayed ahead. My math's not great. I might have been $25 up. So, yeah, Lot Z was the ticket. Worked out well.
You want to talk about the race?
Yeah, let's talk about the race.
So your good luck tidings to Mr. Binotto did not tide well.
It's all my fault.
It is the first race since the summer shutdown where Ferrari did not sit on pole position and did not get a podium. However, they still put on quite a show there, especially with Sebastian Vettel's right rear suspension failing.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I knew he was in trouble as soon as I saw that left front kind of look a little bit light. I'm like, that means, you look to the opposite corner of the car, and that's where the problem is. If you see a part of the car kind of listing, it's the opposite corner just because of the way these open-wheel cars work. Do you think it was the bumps? Because I never did read anything post-race asking, what was going on with that suspension, because it was such a strange way for it to fail, but also you could tell that he was being affected pace-wise from the very first lap. He got passed by Lewis Hamilton in a corner you do not overtake in.
Yeah, he complained from the get-go because the one thing they do well, we had screens right in front of us, and the play-by-play from the British guys that were working the PA was pretty good, and they would play driver audio. So we were getting the Sky feed, but with different announcers. But then if the drivers talked, they laid out, and we heard it. So we heard from the get-go, I've got a complete understeer. It will not turn. The front will not turn. I think it was broken off the start. I think it had already been damaged. The speculation in the stands where I was, they added a sausage curb, an orange sausage curb in turn 8, actually, because drivers were cutting over and exceeding track limits there. And so they added this curb to deter them, and the feeling in the stands was he hit that curb and broke it. But when you watch the highlight, he didn't take a different line that the other two cars. I mean, they were all in a straight line going across that thing and bouncing. So I don't think that did it. And it was only there for the race. It wasn't there during any of the practice or qualifying. I think something had already broke. I think that explains why he was so bad early on in that race. But to hear 170,000 people moan at the exact same time was weird.
It's a weird feeling, isn't it?
It was loud. It was just like, oh! And you see that thing three-wheeling off. My question, I still have not seen the Sky broadcast yet. I have not watched the race. I saw the highlights on YouTube just to kind of – and it's different when you're in the event. You don't get that same discussion from hearing all the people in the booth discussing what's going on. My question to you, in real time watching it, I thought he did his teammate, who also did not have a good start, I thought he did his teammate a disservice by parking the car so far off the racetrack that they could just push it behind the wall. I thought he should have stopped closer to the racetrack and got at least a VSC, if not a safety car. Did they mention that at all?
I don't recall them mentioning that. I was actually I was on my way to a concert. I saw Slayer that night on their farewell tour.
Slayer.
Slayer. They were awesome, by the way.
A little different than Imagine Dragons, Pink, and Kool in the Gang.
Yeah, is that what you had at Coda?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Well, I mean, who was it? Phil Anselmo was there. He opened up the guy who used to be in Pantera. That's a Texas band. And so was Primus. It was fun. So I went to my cousin's house, and he's a diehard Carolina Panthers fan. And we pregamed the concert at his house with the race on one screen and his football game on the other. So I was catching most of what I would normally catch if I was just watching intently in solitude. But I do not recall them putting forth the notion that a virtual safety car, or if Vettel had parked somewhere differently, could have assisted his teammate.
He was he parked literally where one of the gaps was.
But that's what they tell you to do. You're not supposed to do what happened in, what was that, Sochi, where one Ferrari blew up and ruined the other's race.
But as damaged as that car was, I don't think anybody would question it if he'd have just stopped the car.
Yeah.
Right there on the corner, right in one of the runoff areas, and just been, you're going to have to come get it. Because at that point in time, Leclerc had to have been 4 seconds, 5 seconds. I mean, literally at that point in time, it was Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton. It was probably, lap 5?
But unless
somewhere in there, and I turned to my wife and I said, this is how it's going to end. There will be no more passing here unless Lewis ends up first and Bottas is second. This is your top three.
Yeah, I think that was pretty obvious that Ferrari did not have the pace that Verstappen or the two Silver Arrows
Though
had.
I believe Leclerc ended up with fastest lap, so it wasn't like they were horribly slow, but they just couldn't handle.
Well,
and they don't know why. I looked it up today. Binotto still doesn't know why Leclerc was so bad, although he did say after the race they detuned the engine just a little bit because of the issue he had in FP3, that they were concerned about it. He had an oil leak, and they weren't sure what caused it. And then Vettel, they're going to go with the assumption that it had already broken, but none of the data said that.
If you're a Ferrari fan, the biggest concern is that they weren't a threat for pole position when you would have expected them to be.
He was 100th off. That's not much.
Yeah, but after winning 6 straight poles, you wouldn't expect it to be Bottas that comes and beats you to that pole position. Now, we later found out that Hamilton had a steering wheel issue, and that's why he was down in 5th. It sounds to me like, and this is part speculation, part informed guess, I'm getting the impression that Ferrari is treating this, now that the titles are wrapped up, as a test session for next year. I think they moved away from the straight line speed concept that has served them so well in the second half of this season, and they're trying different downforce configurations. And I think that Verstappen was beating his chest saying, see, you were cheating with the engine.
Yeah,
because
there was a lot of talk about that.
You're going slower now that there's been I think there was a technical inquiry from the FIA after Red Bull didn't protest, but they said, can you tell us, is it legal if we do this? Kind of like the
had to do with fuel flow. It didn't have to do with leaking the oil that we first thought. They had to do with the fuel flow.
It seems like there's a lot of talk of red engine witchcraft. The Red Witch.
And yet Lewis wins his 6th championship. They finish 1-2. Nobody's pointing at the silver cars that are winning every week.
I think it's because it was so dramatic how Ferrari just leapt ahead of everyone in the horsepower race. I don't think that this performance is a reaction, if I'm reading between the lines correctly, and that's a bit of a stretch sometimes to try to read intent from across an ocean with, not having anyone in that shop that we can lean on to be like, hey, why were you guys this far off? But I get the impression that they're testing their downforce core concept for next year to try to come up with a car that maybe doesn't eat tires the way it currently does.
Yeah.
So I think you can expect probably more of the same at Brazil and Abu Dhabi of teams trying to figure out what the concept for next year is going to be and how to get a head start on that. That's one of the nice things about having a championship sealed up early for both the teams chasing you and the team that accomplishes that is now with nothing really to play for in terms of money. We know that first, second, and third, it's going to be Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. I don't think there's any way any of them can change position in the coming 3 weeks. So what do you have to lose other than, some trophies and disappointing Tony Rizzuti at his first ever Grand Prix?
Well, it wasn't just me. I mean, if you looked at the fans, and it's pretty much that at every Grand Prix because they've been in it since the get-go and kind of been the dominating team when you think about the history of Formula One. I mean, the crowd is 46% red, right? And then next is it's hard to tell between Red Bull and Mercedes. It's kind of equal, though Mercedes – their merchandise is so muted because it can be black, it can be silver, it can be white, it could be the various colors that teal that they use and stuff. So it's really hard to tell the Mercedes fans that it doesn't stick out like the other two. But yeah, it was disappointing to see that, though. I did get a picture of the car on the rollback, and you don't typically see a Formula One car on the back of a rollback. That's usually NASCAR sitting up there. So that was pretty cool that I got a picture of that. I'll tell you what the big thing in our corner was Alex Albon, because Albon gets the damage right off the start. And I've kind of watched the replay from all the in-car cameras, he ends up with contact with Sainz, which breaks his front wing. But when you look at it, he really ended up in the middle of a three-way thing, and Leclerc kind of squeezed him over into Sainz. That's what caused the damage. But Albon has to stop, put on a new wing, and he's got to be 5-6 seconds behind the Williams, and then the next time he comes by Eric, it's like 3 seconds, and then the next time he's like within striking distance, and then we see him pass. It was either Kubica or Russell, and he like starts working his way through the pack, and it was like the grandstands would go crazy, and they're following him the whole way around because we could see out of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We would lose them going into 7, but we could watch them almost the entire way down the backstretch. Couldn't actually see 10 because of a tent, but we saw them come out of 10 into that next little, 11, 12, 13, and then we would lose them as they went around the giant tower, that big carousel right there. So we saw a lot of it, and every time he passed somebody, the grandstands would go nuts, and I'm like, are we really going crazy for a pass for 17th? And we were. What a run by Albon to bring that thing back to 5th. That was just mega.
With the extra pit stop, he finished, 78 seconds off of the race winner. He was only 20-something seconds off of Leclerc for 4th, who made one less pit stop than him.
It was a mega drive.
Horner said that he thinks it's his best drive of the season. And you look at the numbers, and things are a little bit... The numbers, they say the numbers don't lie. I think the numbers are lying a little bit. We haven't seen a Red Bull on the podium this year with the exception of Max Verstappen, and if you want to count it, Danny Kvyat's Toro Rosso at Germany, even though that was an outlier race. But Albon has been outscoring Verstappen mostly because of Verstappen's reliability and contact issues since they made the driver swap. But I think Albon is doing everything the team is asking of him. He is a rookie, and he's got to try to get on pace with I can't think of a driver who you'd less want to be teammates with in F1 right now than Max Verstappen. He's the new Alonso in terms of, God, I got to be on pace with this guy, except for maybe George Russell, but that's a conversation for maybe later. But Albon has answered the bell, and he has got the attention of Red Bull brass in a good way. This is what he needed. I think he's locked up his drive for next year. Yeah, it hasn't been announced, but I think they're going to make up their mind soon that Albon is their guy for 2020.
It was the fans seemed to really like him, which was, he's a young guy, and
the drivers seem to like him.
Yeah.
All the kids that he came up racing against, your Charles Leclerc's, your Lando Norris's, they say this guy, when we were karting, he was the man. And in Formula 2, he didn't have the best equipment, and he's still impressed enough to get that chance at Toro Rosso. And he's been at the right spot at the right time a few times, but isn't that how you get into a winning ride sometimes?
And
he's earned this opportunity, and he's starting to look good in it now.
And COTA's not what I would call a big overtake track. Like, there's not a lot of passing at the U.S. Grand Prix. There's a couple of areas where you can outbrake somebody, usually 10, turn 1, and that's about it. Sometimes down in 9, but that run in there is kind of a little bit odd, so you'd really have to be attacking somebody. He attacked them everywhere. Like, when he put that bit between his teeth, he was coming back up through, and he didn't care. I mean, it was ridiculous how good he was, and the crowd seemed to like that. That was pretty cool. Lando Norris, you just mentioned one of the other young drivers. He was who I had for my midfield MVP. He came through for me as the midfield MVP with a incredible battle that he had with Danny Ricciardo near the end of the race. But how about the fact that in Q2, it was Lando Norris who was fastest? The crowd was going crazy for him as well.
I think a lot of that had to do with the top teams wanting to start on the other tire.
I agree.
But I don't think that takes away from the lap that he put in.
That's the first time he's been fastest in any qualifying runs. And we bring up a lot of these little stories of these younger guys because the U.S. market is a underserved market. It's also, how do I put this correctly? For the most part, there are your racing snobs like us, and then there's the uneducated who know who Hamilton is, they know who Vettel is, they've heard of Verstappen. That's all they really know. There were a lot of those people at this race. I bet 30 or 40% of those people didn't know anything about what they were watching, and some of these young future stars, the good in the sport, having all sorts of people being successful, were able to shine at some point in time in Austin. I think that's great for Formula One here in the States.
I teased the name just a few minutes ago. I want to throw this out there. Some of the analytics, some of the guys who take deep dives at, pace and consistency and looking at a season long compared to your teammate, compared to the cars that are winning races, it's really hard to quantify the performance that a driver in a real crap car, it's hard to really measure them. From what I'm understanding from some of these experts, they're saying that George Russell is doing a Fernando Alonso in his Minardi 2001 type performance right now. And it looks like he'll be back in that car for next year. Hopefully the car's a little bit more competitive. But I think it was Claire Williams said that George Russell is a future Formula One world champion.
He's either going to be Hamilton's teammate or Bottas's teammate, depending on how long Hamilton wants to run. And I got the impression from Hamilton, he's nowhere close to finishing. I think that's who replaces Bottas after next year.
Unless Ocon really sets the world on fire, because I think the world of Hülkenberg, and he can't live with Ricciardo's pace. I think Danny Rick is still super underrated because, remember, he gave Max Verstappen all he could handle. He's the only guy in Max's career to have ever done that to Max Verstappen on a consistent basis. So I'm really excited next year to see where Ocon really measures up because, a year off, it's kind of hard to gauge. One, how does that affect you? He's not the first driver to do that. I've just mentioned Alonso in Minardi in 2001. He didn't drive in 2002, and then he got the Renault drive in 2003 and started winning races. Ocon, I don't know that Renault will be capable of winning races next year, but Danny Ricciardo is going to be his measuring stick, and we're all going to get an eyeful of what Esteban Ocon is really made out of.
Well, we're going to see which Ocon do we get. Do we get the one that charges and does a good job, or the one that ended up wadding up a bunch of cars when he was with Racing Point? Well, Force India at the time.
Him and
Perez
he had a lot of
issues.
They had issues getting out of each other's way. There was a lot of ego and competitiveness between the two of them.
Well, and he didn't help himself in the Max Verstappen thing at COTA last year. Whether he was
he took
or Brazil,
the race leader.
Whether he was right again, I told you that 1-2 complex reminds me of Brazil every time I'm there. Yes, he's on fresh tires, but no, you don't usually race a Formula One leader of the race that way. You just don't.
Yeah.
Or at least not in a corner. You just do it somewhere else. So that'll be interesting. Latifi was in the car for FP1 for Williams. I told you I had that dream a while ago that he's going to be Russell's teammate. That's like the second or third time he's done FP1. I haven't seen anybody else do it for the Williams. I got to feel that's going to be you're going to have a Russell Latifi combination next year, and that's a great young base if Williams can ever figure it out just a little bit. If they could even just get Haas good, they've got a great young talent base there.
I do think that's where they're going, but this was actually scheduled from the beginning of the season when Latifi signed on as their reserve driver. This was always planned that he was going to have 3 or 4 FP1 outings. I think he's going to be back in the car in either Brazil or Abu Dhabi. They're alternating whether it's going to be Russell's seat like it was at COTA or if it's going to be Kubica's seat like it was a few weeks ago before that. But yeah, Latifi, I wanted to ask you how he looked, but I don't think we really got enough to, because didn't they have a mechanical problem?
Yeah, he got like 3-4 laps maybe. I don't even think that many. I think 2 to 3 laps, and they had a transmission problem. I saw him. I happened to see him where I was when I walked in the gate at turn 9. I saw him make 2 runs and then didn't see him again. So, yeah, it was a tough break. We really didn't get a chance to get a lot of him in that race. What was also interesting about FP1, we're kind of bouncing all over the place here, but that's fine. There wasn't much to the race other than the end.
It was fairly straightforward, with the exception of Lewis very nearly pulling another rabbit out of the hat.
Because he can make those tires work, man. It's incredible, and Bottas got him. He was eventually going to get him, and then whether or not Verstappen could have caught him, Verstappen later found out he had a giant hole in the floor of his car, and that hurt his balance quite a bit. But that was really kind of all that went on in the race. FP1, Pirelli brought out their 2020 tire, and everybody got a chance to go out on it. In fact, I got a really great picture of Sebastian Vettel and the Ferrari, and I didn't even notice it until I put it as my desktop background on my computer that there's no markings on the tires. That was the 2020 tire. The reviews, Eric,
they were not good.
They weren't good. Pirelli came out over the PA system, and they were asked about it, and they said, look, it's colder than it's been anywhere this year for this practice, and it was. I was in a heavy coat. It was probably 50 degrees, 51 degrees, but the wind was howling, so it was really like a 40-degree day. It was very cold. It was very windy, so it wasn't optimal conditions to drive the tire. Also, because it's FP1, and most of them did it late in FP1, they didn't do it early. They had their rakes on and everything early on. Nobody was going to adjust their setup for a new tire that they've never been on. Pirelli said, this tire does not have the grip of the current tire. It's designed to not be as grippy. It's also designed to fall off a lot quicker. So guys going out saying, this tire's like being on ice. It has no grip at all. Well, that's what it was designed for, especially when it's 40 degrees. So Pirelli was like, pump the brakes on their reaction. We get what they're saying. We'll find out in the offseason when they can actually put a proper setup around the tire, whether we abandon it. But as you told me when we discussed this, there's a lot of team owners and team principals that are pushing them to abandon now, and let's not make that big change when we know we're going to change the tire completely in 2021 with new size rims and a new car.
Yeah, we'll see. I know Horner and Safnauer at Racing Point were some of the ones who had said that they felt it was a complete failure. It's not worth the change. I think we need more data, just like you said. You made some very good points about, 1, the temperature being an outlier, and 2, the teams. If you're not going to set up your car for the tire, then you're not getting good data for the tire. So, yeah, we'll see what they do. I don't think this issue is settled yet. There are 2 more things I want to talk about real briefly about the race before we take a quick break and talk about the other bombshell going on in
real
Snobby
quick
racing.
From FP1, the greatest line I heard the entire time. FP1 ends, and Ted Kravitz goes over to interview Sebastian Vettel. They played it over the monitors there, over the video screens, and he asked Sebastian Vettel about his laps out there, and Sebastian's like, "Is marijuana legal in Texas?"
And
he's like, "Because I could smell it everywhere." And Ted said something about, weed or something, and it was just Sebastian apparently could smell it all over, and it led all sorts of things about if Sebastian doesn't do well, it's because he got high, because he got high, because he got high. I never smelled it at all. My wife said she did, but apparently he could smell it in the car, especially around Haas Hill and that kind of section on the back part of the course and down in turn 9. I don't know.
Smells like a party.
Something I just thought that was, you rarely hear a driver as closed in as they are with all the different stuff could actually smell what was going on in Texas. That was bizarre. Back to the race.
If there was going to be a track where you expected to smell weed, where would it be? I know Watkins Glen, if it was following a Fish concert.
Spa.
Fish played Watkins Glen a few times.
Oh, yeah?
That would be one. Maybe Sebring, spring break crowd.
Yeah, definitely Sebring.
Yeah, Sebring. Yeah,
Spa. I could see Spa.
Yeah.
Kind of over there.
Yeah, in the Ardennes forest. Anyway, a couple things I wanted to point out to you.
Yep.
What was the reaction with the Perez-Kvyat collision on the final lap?
Another one of those giant. So I did not see it. We left because it was obvious. I mean, again, from lap 3, it was obvious how the race was going to end. It just was in what order. We left with 20 laps to go in the race to walk what had to have been 2.5 miles uphill to get in position right in front of the podium for the track fan access.
Ooh, cool.
So we're in this like mosh pit of people. We can hear the PA. One guy had it on his phone. I couldn't get a good enough signal to watch it on my phone. And we heard just the giant groan, and the guy behind me who's watching on his phone was like, Kvyat just ran over Perez. I saw the replay. I don't know where Danny thinks he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, he was pissed.
Perez couldn't have given him any more room.
If you watch Perez's onboard, you're just, he's running, and thud, Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
And it's the second straight race.
The torpedo.
Where the torpedo has returned, the nickname that Sebastian gave Kvyat after getting blown up by him a couple times in Russia when he was a Red Bull driver. But that's the second straight week that Kvyat has gotten a final lap penalty while fighting at the end of a Grand Prix for just a scrap of points, you know, 8th, 9th, 10th. I believe it was with Hulkenberg in Mexico. He got a penalty on both of them. He's pretty pissed, but when I watched it, it looked pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, that one, we heard the groan for that, and then when Bottas passed Hamilton, there was like a loud cheer. I don't think it was a cheer against Lewis. I think it was a cheer for a pass for the lead.
Yeah. And Lewis tends to have a lot of fans here, but Bottas, based on the pole position, you knew that his strategy was probably going to be quicker, but we've seen Lewis pull these miracles off before, so nothing really surprises me anymore, which brings me to the other point I have to make.
Sure.
When Lewis Hamilton does this craziness from 5th and gets up to 3rd by passing 2 Ferraris in the opening lap, even if one of them's damaged, then gets into a race-long battle with Verstappen and Bottas.
Well, in Ferrari's defense, a McLaren and a Renault got by him as well.
Yeah.
In an area you don't normally pass a Ferrari.
But you think about where Hamilton could have been if
Sure.
he's in front of those Ferraris to begin with, if he doesn't have that issue in qualifying. If Lewis Hamilton, who has only, by the way, claimed 4 pole positions this year, that's not a lot by his standards. No. He usually averages a lot more. In fact, I think he had more pole positions his first year at Mercedes when that car could barely compete for wins. They were really good in qualifying, but they destroyed their tires in 2013, his first year after leaving McLaren. But when Lewis Hamilton leads after the start into the first corner, whether it's from pole position or making an overtake, it's game over.
Yeah.
I can't remember another driver except for maybe Sebastian Vettel in those Red Bull days where you knew if you give this guy a sniff, he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch him fight and win this championship after only taking 4 pole positions and trying to clever his way through race strategy, through just mid-race pace. He just doesn't go away. He's such a bulldog. And Bottas can win these races, and Verstappen is obviously super talented, and both drivers at Ferrari have shown their might this year. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone who can just close the door on a race like Lewis Hamilton does.
He's so incredibly fast. He's so good racing wheel to wheel with you and not making a mistake. And then you add on the fact that there's no driver that's better at making a set of tires last. And it'd be one thing if he sat around and rode fifth and made it a one-stop strategy, but he's challenging people for second. He's right there behind the leader, and he's still able to make tires that aren't supposed to go as far as they go. It's incredible how smooth he is.
He's never lost that edge, because remember when he came into F1, he was the most exciting overtaker in a long time.
Yeah.
And I'd put Ricciardo kind of in the same class as him, and if he was a little more successful, I think Verstappen deserves consideration, but he also tends to clout the car next to him a little more frequently than either Hamilton or Ricciardo does. But the fact that he still has that edge and that fearless killer instinct to make overtakes while being the complete driver who has won more pole positions than anyone else and can make tires last better than anyone else in an era where all of that matters, that's where you just got to take your hat off and say, bravo.
I think he's incredible.
Sixth world championship, well-deserved.
I think he's incredible. That's why I thought the commentary coming out of it was, let's not overreact. I mean, it's 6 championships. No, he's one of the greatest ever. Again, argue what nobody's ever going to be right on who's greatest, ever. You can't in between eras. I don't know if Michael Schumacher could have driven a car back in the 50s and 60s that slid around. I don't know. He never did it. I don't know. I don't know if those guys could have driven the computer cars and had they weren't exposed. We're never going to know who the greatest is. All you can say is one of the greatest, and there's no way you can look yourself in the mirror and not say Lewis Hamilton is one of the greatest racing drivers, regardless of what kind of racing it is that the world has ever seen. The fact he hasn't been knighted yet is incredible, and I know they tend to wait until somebody's career's over, but come on, that's Sir Lewis Hamilton if anybody's going to be a sir.
Oh, that's got a nice ring to it, doesn't
it? You mentioned the polls, just for people to know. Leclerc has the most in 19 with 7, Bottas 5, Hamilton 4, Vettel 2. That's a little surprising to me. And Verstappen getting the 1, which we were kind of waiting for because he was
kind of waiting for it too.
Yeah.
But man, Lewis Hamilton getting out qualified by his teammate. That doesn't happen very often.
Well, one couple last things before we switch over to the big news of the day and kind of talk about that. I just want to give an overall experience for those people that have never been to a Formula One race. Go. It's so much fun. It feels like a bigger event. I've been to the Indy 500. I've been to the Daytona. I've been to all the big events. I've been in motorsports almost 30 years, or over 30 years. I've been to the World Series. I've been to the Super Bowl. I've been to I've been to the Masters. I've been to all these big events. This one felt like on a different level. Now on race day, I didn't have the same tickly feelings that I have at the Indy 500 before a start or the Daytona 500. So the race day experience didn't have the same type of feel, but the overall event did. It was something special. The people, every fan at the racetrack was wearing something of a race team. You could see everybody picked a team, and it was so cool to see the colors. There were McLaren people. There were Renault people. There were Alfa people. There were a few Williams people.
Haas.
There were a ton of Haas. The Haas got great. Every time they came by, people cheered. I'm like, really? We're still doing this? Like, they're really not an American team. They just have an American owner. They've not moved over here yet.
I think they're just cheering that Rich Energy's gone.
It could be. And did you see that's for another day, their post that they're with, whatever. It was really neat. All the people were so nice, so friendly. So I never saw any drunk, crazy people. People weren't yelling and none of that. No fighting. No, I'm not saying it didn't happen and maybe I missed it. Everybody we were around was cordial, was nice. Was it expensive? Yes. But if you've got a chance to go to the race and you really want to go, save up the money. You don't have to do it crazy. You can do general admission and save a lot of money. You can park in there were yards that were $20 the day of the race. It would have been a walk, but there were good shuttles. There were lots of rickshaw, bicycle drivers. They were a great deal. Those people were all like, we took one day and they're like, pay us whatever you think's fair. There was plenty of transport. Go to the race. Experience it. Don't wait. Go. It's fun. All right, with that, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the U.S. Grand Prix at the end if there's anything we missed. But there was a bombshell. I mean, in all of racing, this was probably the biggest news, and it was, at least in my book, I don't know about Eric's, unexpected. We'll talk about that when we return on American Racing Snobs.
Here's your chance to win a set of your very own Hercules tires. Go to HerculesTires.com/MRN. Simply register, and each month we'll give away one set of tires. Hercules Tires has the value, selection, and industry-leading mileage coverage to get you wherever you need to go, no matter where the road takes you. Register now for your chance to win a set of Hercules tires at HerculesTires.com/MRN. Hercules Tires. Ride on our street.
Welcome back to American Racing Snobs. Eric Morse alongside Tony Rizzuti. We teased it earlier. The surprise news, it was a surprise to me as well. Roger Penske. We've always called him, what, the Enzo Ferrari of American racing? I think he may have just outdone Enzo because he has now purchased the Indianapolis Motor Speedway along with the NTT IndyCar Series in mass. The entire thing is now his.
That's the part that blew me away.
Yeah, that is crazy, especially since Roger, it was nearly 20 years ago that he got out of the racetrack owning business. Our parent company actually relieved him of, what was it, 4 tracks?
Yep. Michigan, Auto Club,
Nazareth, and Rockingham.
Yes.
And now he is back in a big way, and I can't see a downside to this. He is the person who could take open-wheel racing in the United States to a new level.
My initial feeling was, fear that he had dropped his teams or sold them to somebody. That just off the initial hearing of it, I'm like, oh, no, did he have to give up his teams and now he's going to do this? I don't like that idea at all. Then when I realized he wasn't, I'm like, well, how's he, like, people aren't going to like this. Then when I saw all of his competitors, other owners, was like, this is great. We have no concerns over him abusing the system. We believe in what he's put in to keep it separate and everything. And after that, it was like, yeah, I'm with you. I can't see.
He's a man of integrity. And I think without that reputation and the trust of the other owners, this doesn't work. This could be huge. This is what could open the door for NASCAR IndyCar doubleheaders. It could see the return of Formula One to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now that we don't know what...
We could see that. That's meh to me.
But we don't know the state of the Miami parking lot Grand Prix, as it's now being called.
Couple of ladies took him down in round one.
Yeah, so he is a person who has invested his entire life in motorsports, specifically in this country, whether it's sports cars, currently running teams in IMSA, NASCAR. He is IndyCar.
Yep.
He was before, but now he quite literally is IndyCar, and I think this is only going to make the sport better for all of us.
It's interesting because I saw two, and they were done as satire and kind of funny. I saw two things. One, well, he's owned Indianapolis for a long time anyway. He might as well have made it official based on all the wins he's had there, right?
Umpteen Indy 500 victories.
The other one
this year.
The other one that was tongue in cheek that I got a really good chuckle out of was somebody saying, "Well, it only took like 25 years, but he finally won the split." I thought that was pretty good too.
The schism, if those of you who have shorter memories than others, Roger and Chip Ganassi and a lot of the team owners were part of the driving force where they couldn't come to a deal with Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the mid-'90s. The series back then known as CART, which became Champ Car, couldn't reach a deal to stay at the Indy 500, so Tony George made his own series, the Indy Racing League, and for 8 or 9 years, they competed against each other until reunification in 2008. We're still feeling the pain from that. Even a decade later, it's still not what it was, because in the 90s, it looked like IndyCar was going to be every bit as big as NASCAR was becoming in this country. And they kind of missed out on some of those bread and butter days. And now that the audience is more segmented, I think this is going to be a real good thing to push IndyCar to that next level. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. The one short-term ramification before we move on to some other news around the world is we're getting close to the 1 hour mark already, aren't we?
Yeah, 48 minutes. We're all right.
We're pushing.
We're okay.
It does appear that you will no longer see Roger Penske as a strategist. You see him up on top of the pit boxes along with Tim Cindric making race strategy calls. I think those days are done. He certainly put his time in the trenches, and I think everyone respects Roger for having to take this step out of the pit strategy game and into the upper management of the series. But as we said earlier, I think this can only be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there needs to be kudos to the Holman family, Tony George and the entire Holman family. There was a time, and it was a long time ago, before you and I, Eric, that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was darn near in disarray. And they rescued that fine facility, and they worked for countless numbers of years, decades, to continue to improve that speedway to give us the event that we get every May, which is, it's really unrivaled. It's always an incredible race. It's got strategy, it's got passing, it's got speed, it's got everything. It is the Indy 500. Thank you to the Holman family for what you have meant to open wheel racing and, more importantly, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because without them, we may not have this treasure.
As an American racing snob, when you travel abroad to a race, as I've done to a couple Grand Prix or to Le Mans a few times, I've been lucky enough to go there. When you talk to especially European-based racing fans, the first thing they want to ask you is, tell me about the Indy 500. It is one of those races that arrests the entire racing world's attention. So it would not be that without that family. So as you said, I echo that sentiment. Thank you. And we look forward to what Roger can do with it now, as the captain has now taken over Indianapolis Motor Speedway. One other brief IndyCar note. It doesn't have a lot of substance to it, but I do have some friends inside of James Hinchcliffe's team, and don't have any information. Even if I had it, I probably couldn't say anything, but I did get this message: we ain't dead yet.
Ooh.
So good luck to James. I know it's really late in the game. Everybody at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Roger Penske's entire operation there that he now owns, everyone wants to see James Hinchcliffe on the grid next year, not just in a car, but in a car that can win races. So hopefully something can be put together either in the short term or the long term for the mayor of Hinchtown, friend of this show. So good luck to James.
I hope the same thing happens with Hinchtown Hammerdown, because the Flat 12 Beer Works is changing its name. It's no longer going to be. So hopefully that will continue. In fact, I'm trying to look.
I sent a note to the gentleman who purchased Flat 12 about a year ago. His name's Jason Werfel.
Yep.
He wanted to change the name of the brewery, but he is going to keep his relationship with both racing drivers that he has a beer named after. That's Jared Andretti.
Yep.
And James Hinchcliffe's Hinchtown Hammerdown. Both of those will remain. They're changing the branding from Flat 12, which I thought was a nice nod to the racing heritage of that town. They're changing it to RAD.
RAD Brewing Company.
I don't think it's like the BMX movie.
No, I don't think so. I guess they have a restaurant, Books and Brews, or...
Yeah, that's Jason's previous company.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so we'll see where that takes us, but we do expect the Hinchtown Hammerdown
Got to keep the
continue.
hammer down.
Yeah. It's too popular. I know we just talked about F1 for like 45 minutes, but I did want to mention Antonio Giovinazzi. I think he did a nice job in the second half of the season matching his teammate Kimi Räikkönen, did well enough to stay in the fold there and keep his seat, even though Nico Hülkenberg was an option for them. They decided to go with their guy. Antonio Giovinazzi has earned another season at Alfa Romeo, so congratulations to him. It's looking more and more like Nico Hülkenberg is not going to be an option at Williams. We've been talking about Latifi there. I think Hülkenberg said in the press that it just wasn't the right time to be racing at Williams, which means, hey, I love those guys. They gave me my F1 debut, but I don't need to come out here and run 19th at this stage in my career.
How much longer do you think Kimi does this?
I think he finishes the contract. So he signed, what, a 2-year deal with Alfa? So next year could be the swan song.
He came out after the U.S. Grand Prix and said, if I'm going to run 11th, I might as well be last. Like, he's not having a good time in that car.
But he was doing so well at the start of the season when they had that straight-line speed advantage on people. He was scoring points consistently. when he signed the contract at the end of last year, he went to the press conference, and they asked him about his passion to drive, and even if it's a car that can't win, he says, no, I'm not passionate about this. I just signed this contract to mess with you.
Yeah.
I love Kimi. I think we're going to have one more year of Kimi, and anything beyond that I think is going to be a big bonus. So get your Kimi filled. We've got 2 races left this year, and all of next year is what he's slated to do.
If Hülkenberg doesn't find a ride, and as we've said, it doesn't look good at all that he is in, is 1 year out of Formula One almost too long when you start looking at this incredible base of young talent that's out there, whether it be F2 or as reserve drivers in F1?
There's just not enough teams out there right now. And I do think for someone of his age, it's going to be harder to land on his feet than, say, Esteban Ocon, who had the backing of a major team trying to get him a ride. I think Hülkenberg's kind of on his own. I think the best he can hope for is to have a successful second career, probably in DTM, the German touring car series that you've seen. I think that's where Paul di Resta came
Maybe the
from.
WEC.
Timo Glock. I mean, Nico's looked good in his few WEC outings. Remember, he is a 24-hour of Le Mans overall outright winner for Porsche. So there will be a home for Nico Hülkenberg. Will it be a race that we can watch on TV in the States? Probably not.
Do you think we'll see him in Formula One ever again if he doesn't find a ride?
I doubt it. I do think that he would be a super sub option, though, if you needed to make a change mid-season, if something wasn't going right, if someone got injured. If you don't have a seasoned reserve driver, he could be someone that you call up and can be reasonably on pace on short notice. So,
I mean, if you look at the F2 guys, Nick de Vries is going to – and he's running the Mercedes in the Formula E, right?
Yeah.
Is that what we saw?
Yeah. So
we think Latifi's probably going to end up at Williams, but you still got Lucas Giotto, who's been a solid up-and-coming young driver. Jack Aiken is really good. Obviously, Mick Schumacher, when it's time to move him up, he's probably an alpha guy at some point in time.
I think if Mick Schumacher improves at the rate that they're expecting him to improve next year, that he could be a candidate if Kimi decides to retire to go to alpha. The other guys, it's all going to be dependent on money and what opens up.
You've got Matsushita, you've got Zhao, you've got Markelov. There's lots of these guys that have shown speed from time to time.
I think a lot of those guys you're going to find
Award?
popping up in Formula E. Well, Award is now signed to McLaren for the IndyCar season along with Ollie Askew.
I'm talking, a couple years down the road. Yeah. I think if Hülkenberg's out, he doesn't come back.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
That's interesting. Kind of the guy who never did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
he was
fair or
one
unfair.
of those guys that Hobbs thought was destined to be
a lot of people
world champion.
Did. Will
for
Buxton
Ferrari.
did. Will thought he was a guy that
he
never
was
lived
so
up to the
impressive
opportunities.
At Williams, his rookie year, he got a pole position and changing conditions with a car that had no business being on the front row. We'll keep an eye out, see where Nico Hülkenberg lands. We'll certainly keep you posted if we hear anything.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Kyle Busch.
What?
Kyle Busch.
Well, hold on. Whoa. This is Racing Snobs.
He is going to be driving an Acura for Aim Vassar Sullivan in the Rolex 24 at Daytona coming up in January. It's his
I see
first
where you're going.
foray
I see
into
how he made
endurance
it in
racing.
here.
Yeah, he's sneaky. I do believe –
was that supposed to be a Denny Hamlin deal at one time, I heard?
I'm not sure. I know – well, Acura and those Toyota boys, they've kind of had an unofficial relationship back and forth for a couple years now.
Which is weird, isn't it?
Didn't Kyle Busch, I think he drove a Daytona prototype once with Scott Speed.
I think that's
the Paul Revere race at Daytona. So he has been on that track, but I don't think he's been in a GTD car ever. I know Kurt Busch ran the Rolex 24 once in a Riley with his other Roush teammates, that old Crown Royal car with Biffle and Kenseth. But if you're a Kyle Busch fan, it'll be real curious to see where he stacks up.
If you're a Kyle Busch fan, you're not listening to this show, but it fits. It fits.
Last thing I want to talk about.
Yep.
One of my favorite races of the year that is on very few people's radar, the Macau Grand Prix. Are you familiar with it, Tony?
The Macau in Macau where the girl went flying over the fence? Is that same race?
It is that race, the Formula 3 Crown Jewel
thing
race.
Took flight.
Guess what? She's back.
Really?
Sophia Flörsch
All right.
will return to the same track where she had that mega crash 1 year ago. If you haven't seen it, she got YouTube famous in a hurry.
Oof.
It is one of the most violent crashes I've ever seen. I can't believe everyone was okay. There were some photographers injured. She did suffer a fractured back. But when you look at this footage, it's an absolute plane crash.
Yes.
A violent impact. They have made some changes to the circuit to try to make it a little bit safer, but I'm trying to think of how I describe this.
What cars do they run there?
It's Formula 3.
Formula 3. I saw a Formula 3 car in the U.S. Formula 4 garage. Super cool car.
For a spec series, they're pretty damn fun. If you're not familiar with the Macau Grand Prix, it is a crown jewel race. It's coming up November 17th. There are some other familiar names on the entry list. F2 regulars Callum Ilott will be there.
Yep.
Arja Maney. Sauber Junior team is going to have some youngsters you may have heard of. Enzo Fittipaldi.
Nice.
Now that's a racing name right there. He is the grandson of Emerson and younger brother of Pietro Fittipaldi.
Billy Monger?
Nope, but we will see David Schumacher, the
Oh,
son
okay,
of
yeah,
Ralph.
Yeah.
By the way, Ralph, a former winner of the Macau Grand
Still
Prix.
looks great, too, by the way. He was on camera the other day.
Was he?
Yeah, he doesn't age.
Yeah, he's got that German
Yeah,
genes.
he does.
Good eugenics, those Germans. He is the son of Ralph, who won this race in 1995. This used to be one of the stepping stone races to Formula One. It's kind of an outlier. If I was to describe this track to somebody, I don't know. It's like a more dangerous, narrow Baku. It's like if you mixed Monaco and Monza together. It's super narrow, barriers everywhere, really technical track, but super fast.
At one time, Macau, the total amount of money gambled in that city compared to Las Vegas was like almost 2-1 in favor of Macau.
Did you do like an elementary school report on Macau?
No, I
didn't
heard
even know
about
they
it one day.
gambled there.
Oh yeah, there's a big island.
Wow.
It's huge. It was in a James Bond movie.
The only thing I know about it is those terrifying barriers with the yellow stripes. It looks like if you took giant caution tape and put it around Monaco, that's what this track looks like. By the way, Dan Ticktum will be driving for Carlin.
Yep.
He is looking for a third consecutive victory at Macau.
He'll be the favorite there. Interesting side note, talking about Formula 3, Formula 4, some of those smaller series. We went into the my son was, for whatever reason, was fascinated with F4. I think because it's younger kids and it's a stepping stone, and he feels like maybe that's where he should be. By the way, he's 10. But we went into the garage, found an F4 team, and the guy's like, does he want to get in it? I said, sure. So Ryan climbed in the car. They put the steering wheel on there. I took a bunch of pictures, and the guy's like, how old is he? I said, 10. He's like, has he raced anything? I'm like, yeah, some go-karts, which in this case means like K1 speed, not like real go-karts. And he's like, well, I'm always taking applications, which basically means if you want to write a check –
with a lot of zeros.
I don't know what age you get to drive an F4 car, but
Depends how many zeros are on the check.
Yeah, this guy was pretty serious. I mean, he hit me up like 3 or 4 times. I was like, Ryan, we got to get out of here before I spend money I don't have. I mean, I just bought this damn car. I can't buy you one, too.
Yeah, you've got your Corvette, and you need to find some red pants.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, the Nantucket red pants were not going to go. So I need to go to the Puma store and find the red pants to match my $110 Ferrari shirt, which went with the $60 Ferrari hat and the $50 Red Bull. I saved $10 on the Red Bull hat because it was a junior hat. I have a tiny head.
If you can get kids stuff, it's a lot cheaper.
But I had a chance to get you a Nicky hat, and
yeah,
I should have just got it.
I don't think I'd wear it. I need to get like a Kubica something before he retires, since he was my guy way back in the day.
Did we read he's going to be a sim driver for somebody?
Haas.
For Haas.
Yeah, that's
kind of cool.
I don't know if it's signed or not, but that could be real interesting. I did see that both Grosjean and Magnussen were not interested in handing over any FP1 to their test driver to see if he can offer any insight.
Boy, it'd be neat to see him in a better car, though.
Yeah, it would be. And if he's in the fold over there, you never know.
Yeah.
I never say never. I never thought he'd make it back as far as he has so far. So,
you know what I love about this show?
What?
We're at the hour mark, and we just started another topic and probably could go 30 minutes on it.
We could, but I think we'll spare you. I do want to say
we probably should end.
One other thing before we let everybody go. Next week, we've got an off week leading up to Brazil. This is when we're going to have our our argument conversation about who is the greatest across all the eras.
And a lot of people have shared them already. I've got 3 or 4 screenshots of people who have shared who they think their 10 greatest F1 driver ever are. We only ask for we just ask for your greatest, but I've got some
ready.
top 10 lists.
I've got a list of 10, and I think it was hardest for me to figure out who gets that 10 spot. 10 to 11, I agonized over that.
I will say this, Matt Bishop, if you're listening, you can't pick 3 for number 1. My man has Clark, Fangio, and Senna. You can't have 3. You can't.
Oh, it's a great podium right there.
That would be a great podium, but we'll get into all that. So you at Racing Snobs on Twitter. Just tag us on there. Put your top 10, your top 5, maybe your greatest. It doesn't matter. The
you
list
can even
can
tell us why if you want.
Yeah, whatever you want.
I've got
we want to
reasons
include
for
it.
people. I got reasons against people. This is going to be fun next week.
I'm
looking forward to this.
We have a good number of followers. We'll tweet you. We'll call you out on the show. We'd love to see it, and we'll give you our thoughts as well. Eric, this was a lot of fun.
Glad you had a blast down there. Sorry the red cars didn't deliver for you, but I guess that means you're just going to have to go back.
Yeah, maybe. I think because it was the first one, I was just so excited to be there that the performance didn't hurt me. Plus, I'm a Max guy. I know that made a lot of people. One guy's like, isn't that like an Auburn fan wearing Alabama gear? Maybe, but I've made it very clear. I like Red Bull. I love Christian Horner. I like Max. I like Albon. So I got the hat. So that's just the way it is.
You don't have to explain yourself to anybody.
Thank you. Max was on the podium. I was okay with it.
As long as you can explain your Corvette to your wife, I think you don't have to justify anything.
You're just going to have to explain to your wife who the strange person is in Montreal when you already have enough people in that house. Who's the guy on the floor? You remember Tony from Elkhart Lake? Yeah, he's going to be there. All right, good stuff, Eric. As always, check out our podcast. You're listening to it now, so obviously you know about it. But tell your friends, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, pretty much anywhere you want it. Like us on Facebook. You can also follow on the Twitters and subscribe. Hit the little bell anytime we do one. You'll get notified. It was a lot of fun. And as always, for Eric Morse, I'm Tony Rizzuti. We'll talk to you next time on the next American Racing Snobs.